What is an empath? So I'm inspired to do this talk today. Like it's sometimes like I have to look through inspiration during the week as to what I want to talk about. It's not always easy to find subjects to talk about. Let me just put that down. And the reason that I want to talk about the empath today and what it is to be an empath is because I think that a lot of people that listen to my talks don't really understand what it is, and I think I talk about it a lot. So, what is an empath to me? I mean, I'm sure that on the internet there's lots of explanations as to what an empath is. An empath is somebody that has the ability to empathize with other people's feelings. So say if I went to a shop, and in the shop the lady made a mistake with my change or something, and then took a really long time, and then dropped something, and then gave me the change, I would begin to empathize with her feelings. So if she was being really arrogant, then I wouldn't empathize. But if she was being like really sad and apologetic and felt embarrassed, I would empathize with her, and I would feel a sense of not feeling sorry for her, but I would just feel empathy. I would be able to relate to those emotions. I know what it's like to make a mistake, or to be flustered, or to feel like you can't do something. So there would be empathy. And this is the really surprising bit as to why I want to talk about it, is so true empaths, so people that really have a strong sense of empathy and can do that, is only 20% of the population. So a proper, true empath, they think, from research, with really strong abilities to empathize with other people's feelings, is 20%. And then for the rest of society, it's like a spectrum. And then you've got at the top end psychopaths, sociopaths, and narcissists that don't have any empathy. And that means that it's a completely different way of seeing things. Somebody with empathy to somebody without empathy. I even feel like I could go as far to say that somebody with empathy and somebody with very little empathy or no empathy is like a different type of human. Like a very different type of human. So somebody without the ability to empathize, which is a large percentage of our society. So if you've got a friendship group of 20 people, then that might be like 5 of those people that can't empathize, and then maybe 4 people that can empathize, and then people that are sort of in between that can slightly empathize or not very much empathize, or empathize to a certain extent. And the reason it's important to know this is that empaths negotiate with feeling. So in my younger days, if somebody was doing something horrible to me, so if someone was trying to hurt me, I would use the tactic of empathy to get them to see the errors of their way. So I would try and get them to empathize with me. I'd explain, this hurts. This is hurting me. I would explain the feelings. I would say, I feel ashamed, or I feel pain, or I feel embarrassed. I don't like it when you do that. And that tool of negotiation, to try to get somebody to empathize with you that doesn't have empathy, is impossible. And it's a different way in which you negotiate with that person. Somebody without empathy or very little empathy, or not much empathy at all, you have to negotiate with them in strong with strong boundaries. You have to tell them what you want and what you don't want and be clear. And it's pointless kind of bringing empathy into it. It's irrelevant to them how you feel because it's not in their capacity to understand that. And most empaths get taken advantage of because they're assuming that the other person has empathy. And I know this isn't so much related to non-duality, but I will bring it into non-duality. And this is really important to understand, that most of the people that you're negotiating with cannot understand empathy and don't negotiate on that terms. If you don't have any empathy or you have very little empathy, then what your concerns are is what you're going to get from the situation. So they're being nice to you because it makes them feel good. They're doing things because it makes them feel good. On an extreme end, you could say that's the same reason the empath's doing it. But when an empath does an action, it also makes the empath feel good to make the other person happy. It's not just a solely selfish activity. So let me give you an example of this. So I think I gave an example the other day of walking Khaleesi. She's not here at the moment. But I can't remember what that example was. So let me give you an example. So say if I was sitting on the sofa with my boyfriend and the dishes were dirty. Now it's normally always him that picks up the dishes and put them away. I normally do the cooking and he normally takes away the dishes. So after we finished, I sit there and he takes away my plate and it's really lovely. But say I hadn't done the cooking and I didn't think it was fair, and every day he took away the plates and I thought he was doing too much work, that would not make me happy. It would hurt my insides if I saw him doing too much for me, which sometimes he maybe does, but it hurts my heart because it's not just important to me to get as much as I can out of somebody. What's important to me is the fairness and happiness and the success and the thriving or the ability to thrive of the other person. So that's more important to me than having someone clean my house, pick up my dishes, do things for me. And it brings me joy to see the other person flourish because I'm always empathizing with that other person. So if that other person's sad, then I will empathize and feel sad. If they're thriving, then I will empathize with that and I will feel good about them thriving. That is an empath. And we as empaths expect everybody else to be looking at life like that, but it's not the case. The thing is that some people seem like they have consideration for you, but they're only doing the consideration for you out of a robotic impulse that they've been taught. So it's not that when they say to you, oh no, don't do the dishes, you cooked. It's not out of empathy that they do that. It's out of a learned mechanism that they know that they have to do reciprocity. And they cannot understand empathy. So they don't look at you and empathize the fact that you've worked all day. They understand that in the long run, there will be an argument or there will be disharmony if they do this, or they might have a plan for something else. So it's all about what they've been taught and it's all about what they can get from the situation. So it's not necessarily that the person without empathy would just let you do everything, because they've also got social skills and they understand how society works and they understand how far they can push someone. So it's through an understanding which suits them. That is not empathy. But it looks like empathy on the outside. So it looks like someone's being empathetic to your needs, but they're not. It's all in their tactics of the way that they deal with life. They're not having an emotional response at looking at you and feeling empathetic towards you. And that, for an empath, that's really hard to comprehend, because as an empath, you're projecting onto the other person when the other person says, oh no, don't do the dishes, I'll do it. You're projecting onto them that they're having empathy for you, but to them it's a strategy that if they do the dishes now, then they'll get sex or they'll get something else later. And that's a very different way from interacting to the world, whereas the empath genuinely is concerned about how the other people feel, because the empath is very sensitive to feelings and can feel it. And And like you want yourself to be happy, you want the other to be happy, because the border between you and other is very merged. So it's as if their feelings are yours in a way. And the empath finds it very difficult to discern the difference. Even in me saying this, the empath won't want to believe it, because the empath has critical thinking, can reflect, and is optimistic about other people, in the sense that it wants to think the good, it wants to give people the benefit of the doubt, because it has got an open heart, and it doesn't want to believe that other people are like that. It's also scary to imagine other people are like that. And when I was younger, I used to make mistakes in negotiating with people. I used to negotiate with people on terms of empathy, and this would get me into trouble, or get me into situations where I would have been better to discern their behavior and to go to somebody else, but I couldn't discern their behavior because their behavior looked like it was being empathetic and caring towards me, where in fact it wasn't at all. Like when the push comes to the shove, or when you really get to know someone, you see that it's only about their self-interest. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's not a judgment or a blame, but it's the difficulty of the empath, because what happens is the empath often ends up attracted to people that don't have empathy. And the reason that I think it is there could be a couple of reasons for it, but predominantly it's because the empath is more open and more suggestible, and the person without empathy will look for people with empathy because it will suit them and it will be easier to manipulate for them. They'll be able to get away with a lot more. And so because the empath is more open, they'll be hunted by that person, and the empath won't have strong boundaries which push people away. They'll give everybody the benefit of the doubt. Also, empaths can sometimes be confused, because it's confusing being an empath. Number one, because when you grew up, you will have been gaslighted a lot. An empath is really sensitive to feelings. Let me give you an example. So you walk into a room and your mum is furious and she's really angry with your father, and you say to her, "Mum, what's wrong? Are you angry?" The empath, not the empath, the mother won't want to admit her feelings, so she'll be, "Don't be ridiculous, I'm not angry." And this is called gaslighting, and the empath will have had that throughout their childhood and experienced it many times at school, with teachers, with friends, with parents, with siblings. And the other thing is that to an empath, honesty is very important, and the empath will project onto the others that they're being honest. So what it will do is it will create a lot of confusion for that person. The empath tends to be quite open without really strong wants or needs or desires. So therefore it can easily fill up with other people's wants, needs and desires. And again, this leads to a sense of confusion. So therefore, actually somebody without empathy can be quite attractive to the empath, because the person without empathy is normally very focused on what they want and what they can get out of life. And so they have very strong drive and direction. And this is why, this reason, that person without empathy is miserably why, in a way, that our society has got to the place it has. Like a lot of our leaders, politicians, people in power have been without empathy, because if they were sitting there as an empath, then they would never get things done. I'm not suggesting that's the way things should go on. And we've had many leaders that do have empathy, but a lot of them, especially now, if you look around, don't have empathy. They just give the appearance that they have empathy. And I'm going to say something really outrageous now, and this is where I'm going to bring it back to non-duality. I think traditionally a lot of gurus and spiritual teachers have been without empathy. Not all. I don't think, not all of them. I think there's many that did, but I think predominantly it was led by people with very little or low empathy. Because, let me give you an example as an empath. As an empath, I find it difficult to advertise my business. So I've advertised my business a few times. I think currently the retreat I'm doing, the guy that running the hotel, put an advertisement in the paper, but I wouldn't have done that without him, and I was happy for him to do it. And then a couple of times I tried advertising on Facebook just to see what it was like and what it would do. But predominantly, it doesn't make me feel good to advertise. It feels like I'm manipulating people, or that I'm trying to convince people of something. And really what makes me feel good is that people naturally come to my talks through word of mouth, or maybe through a suggestion somewhere, like through a suggestion on YouTube, but they naturally are interested in it, rather than this big advertisement about how you're going to become enlightened if you listen to me, how I'm the greatest master of all time, etc., etc. So I don't tend to advertise. It's part of the reason why I try to keep it really small and don't have people working for me, because this idea of putting it into a business structure hurts my heart. And when I have employed people in the past, it suddenly becomes about making other people money as well as myself. If I don't make myself money, it's only me that I've got to worry about. But if I don't make other people money as an empath, that hurts me if it puts people in jeopardy, or brings worry to them, whatever it is. So an empath, I don't think naturally can do business. And often I think what's happened with artists that are empaths, or creative people that are empaths, they normally have a business partner that doesn't have it. And I don't have that. And in the past, I think that gurus and big spiritual teachers, maybe not the Buddha and ones far back, and not all of them, have had to rely on people advertising and selling a grandiose image of themselves in order to attract an audience. And I think that's a particular type of person that can do that. To make lots of claims, like to make a claim that you're the greatest spiritual teacher ever, that you're enlightened, that you're awake, hurts my heart. For me, firstly, I wouldn't look at myself like that, but it would hurt my heart to push that on people, because it's like pushing your will onto people. It's like, let people make up their own mind. Don't try and sell an image of somebody. Like, let them make up your mind for your creativity, and let life play its role, like in what you have to offer, and if they resonate with it. And I think in order for a lot of gurus to be successful, a lot of teachers to be successful, there has to be a lot of this selling something, and a lot of proclaiming, and also a lot of manipulation of people. It's the same as in business. If you've ever worked in business before, it's the same way in which it works. Not all, I'm thinking of a big spiritual teacher now that I know, Rupert Spira. I think he has empathy, and I think he's very humble about it. And I don't think he makes proclaims really big names about himself. Sorry, sometimes I can't think of the words, it's my dyslexia. I think he's got a lot of empathy. I think that he has in his mind that he wants to get non-duality to as many people as possible, but I don't see that as lack of empathy. And I just can feel it when I look at him and when I watch him, that he doesn't have this grandiose, I am here, I am the savior, like I have the best message ever. I feel like he's very humble. That's just an example, there's many more, but I'm just giving as an example, and I'm sure people can relate to that with Rupert Spira. And what happens is, so with these big teachers that don't have empathy, is that a lot of students are drawn to them with empathy. And the reason it is because they've got a very strong view and a very strong want, and that's very attractive to an empath that's sometimes overwhelmed by this life. And also the empath doesn't project onto the other person that they could be exaggerating or lying, or that these great claiming lots of things about yourself could be untrue, because to the empath, truth and honesty is the most important thing there is. So, and also when the teacher claims that they've got no dynamics left, the empath will just believe it, because again, lying is impossible to the empath. So the empath will then take on everything. So the teacher can be screaming and shouting at them and swearing at them, and the empath will still think it's them because they've said it's not me, it's you. And I'm not actually saying that an enlightened being couldn't be, somebody who's free couldn't be screaming and shouting. I think it's possible. I think that anything can manifest dependent on the situation. Maybe not murder or beating or really harmful things, but I think screaming or shouting could happen. People can do crazy things to each other sometimes. Yeah. So, and then ironically, what it does is it doesn't help that empath to be in that situation, because what it does is it keeps reinforcing to that empath that that their truth is wrong. Because deep down the empath will feel it and know it, but they don't feel strong enough to go their own way and to say what they think. They need other people's validation, because it's confusing being an empath. So to go your own way and to do your own thing is very scary for an empath, and to step away from the group. And it's actually detrimental to the empath in the long run. It can be helpful to an extent to expose lies and to see illusions in yourself and to see the extent into which your illusions go. But if it goes on for years and years and years, then it just reinforces what happened in childhood, that your truth, what you feel, your intuition isn't correct. And that to me feels like the main seeking pattern of the empath, wanting to find truth. So I just wanted to clear that up, because I think a lot of my listeners are empaths and are sensitive. And I just wanted to say what I feel and just validate you for your own feeling and your own intuition on things. So after talking about that, so now let's move to non-duality. So then we could ask, so who is the empath? Like, who is it that's the empath? Let me just check that the internet is still working and going. Yes, it is. So who is the empath? Who let the dogs out? So then when I talk about empaths and people without empathy, doesn't mean you're a narcissist if you're without empathy. There can be other people, like some people with autism don't have empathy. There can be all types of people. But it's a different way of seeing the world and looking at the world and experiencing the world. And it's just being clear about that. But then let's look at who is the empath. So who is this person that is an empath? So it's simply a habit and condition and genetic makeup of the body-mind mechanism. It's not actually an individual self. So the fact that this body produces empathy isn't a character. It isn't an individual soul inside this body. It's part of my brain, part of my body, and it's part of the magic of this thing that produces it. So when I have an experience, I also have an experience and intuition about the other person. It's most probably a very strong sensitivity to the third eye. You have to have that up because it hits my ponytail. If you're a woman, you'll understand what I mean. Maybe it looks a bit strange, but otherwise it keeps getting stuck like the car seat. My tail of the pony. So, and somebody without empathy is simply a body mind that doesn't doesn't arise in that body-mind. And that body-mind without empathy will be more focused on what it wants, whereas the empath is more focused on the inside and the outside. And there's nothing wrong or right, ultimately, about either of these dynamics. It's not like all people without empathy are bad people. It's just different. And it's just understanding that and negotiating that and seeing from a broader perspective. If you believe that everybody has empathy, then it's going to be so confusing, this world. And also, if you're someone without empathy, no, I was going to say maybe it'll give you more insight to other people to not maybe take so much, but no, that's not true. If you don't have empathy, then it's only important what you get. So it doesn't matter to you if you take from the other person. And there's no criticism on that. It's just the way things are. And then there's the people that are the spectrum in between. And it's just the way you're born. They also say it also to an extent can be conditioned. So it's the way your parents treat you and your relationship with your parents. And in that produces a habit and a behavior. So when I interact with people, images and feelings come up of how other people feel. And when that person without empath does that, there is no image of that. It's more focused on what that person wants and what they're going to get from this situation. And we believe that's us. So people suck it in and they say, I'm an empath. And he's not or she's not an empath. And they're guilty because they're not an empath. And that's absolutely not true. There's nobody, ultimately, that's guilty in this life. We can hold people accountable, so we can say, okay, that person isn't a person for me and they cross my boundaries, so you can stay awake and I'm away and I'm going to go to this person. But even that action is a functioning that's happening. It's a brain activity that is producing the appearance of choice, that you've looked like you've made a decision, but your decisions come from the unconscious. They don't actually come from a person. They come from an unconscious functioning that's happening in the body, and they pop out. And our conscious input helps inform the unconscious decision making. But then the person claims that I did it, but there's not actually an I that did something. There's functioning that's happening. Just like with Siri, I say to Siri, could you pull up the best dog website there is on the internet? And Siri chooses, it calculates the data and finds the best website and pulls it up and shows me. And we say, Siri chose the best website for me. But Siri is not actually an entity that lives inside the phone that has the appearance, that has choice. Like, it looks like he has choice because that's the way we frame it in our language, but he doesn't actually have choice. There is a functioning happening, a program that's running, and that's the same with us. The reason I presume that we have the ability to make choices is, or have the ability to contemplate making choices, is because it updates our machine of what's available out there. So if we were to make a choice between eating an apple and eating an ice cream, we can read on the back, maybe not on the apple, but we can read on the internet what's the calories, what's the ingredients, what's the health benefits of each one. And then there can be a choice that made that fits with what the system wants. And we're putting that information into the unconscious or the conscious mind, but it's changing this body mind. It's going to change the responses. So from listening to these talks, you might think you're listening and you're taking in the information and you are learning, whereas it's actually the body that's learning, and this learning will update the system and affect your choices in the future and affect your behavior in the future. Negatively or positively is unknown. More than likely negatively, I would say. Negatively, more than likely positively, I would say. Slip of the tongue then. So that is the appearance of choice. What happens is it gives you a feeling, and the thoughts say, I chose, I made a wrong decision, and it thinks about it, I made a right decision, and it either beats itself up, it beats the other person up, it feels guilty, it feels ashamed, and all of that is kind of redundant functioning that's happening. It happens because you believe that you made the choice, but it's also redundant. And I would say a lot of people's suffering is based around the choosing on what you've chosen, your direction in life. And a lot of people think they're unhappy because of the choices they've made, whereas actually they're unhappy because they've lost the connection to source. They've forgotten who they are and they're identified with a character. But they believe it's because of the situations they've got into and the things they've done or haven't done, which isn't true at all, at all. There is nothing better than this moment, the way you currently are. And this moment is the only place you'll ever be. There's lots of things happening and lots of changes happening. On the human level, there might have been a picking of things that are more pleasurable or painful and worked out better and been more successful or unsuccessful. But this is only pleasure and pain. It's not about your contentment. Contentment, your purpose, your true being is beyond pleasure and pain and beyond being content or discontent. It's beyond that, it's here, it's this moment. Feelings come and go. So then we get to, who are you? Who are you? So who you are is this baby, this moment. And this is true contentment. And this moment doesn't contain the thought, I've done something wrong, I've done something right, I'm guilty, I'm not guilty. Those are thoughts that come and go in this. So it's not that this moment inherently contains those thoughts or those feelings, they come and go in it. What happens is in the human, there seems to be this functioning that claims all of this and then makes it into a center and makes it into a person that's interacting and looking out at the world. And then you imagine this person to be you. Most people imagine themselves in their mind. They have this image of themselves and they have these qualities, but it's quite inherent, this self, and everything becomes part of you. And that always feels uncomfortable identifying because it's a lie, and living a lie never feels comfortable. It's a lie that you are this image and you are a feeling, a thought, an activity, your job, your name, your age, your behavior, your past, your future. What actually you've always been and always will be is this moment. That's all you've ever had. With all the images of what you have and don't have and what you are and what you're not, what you really have is this moment. Baby, right here, looking out at itself, experiencing itself. And the idea also that you're looking from behind your eyes or from inside the head is actually also illusion. When you come right down to this moment, you'll see there's no difference between the looking and the looked at, the hearing and the heard, the feeling and the felt, the smelled and the smelt. I don't know. Actually, the consciousness is in all things. There is simply everything happening and it's experiencing itself. And that's non-duality, that's non-dual wisdom or non-dual philosophy. That who you are is everything. And that's wonderful. It's freedom. And there is this possibility that there can be a remembering of that, even with the functioning of the character. So there can still be a functioning of the character. The character thinks about where it's got to go, what it's got to do, the things it has or owns. But that character isn't sucked in and pulled inside this body and made a you that's in here. That character is seen as a functioning. So thinking about it happens, feelings about that person happen, movements, relationships happen. But the watcher, the experiencer, who you truly are, is right here, and that's not left anymore. So there can be this shift from being that to being nobody, but yet there is appearance of a character happening. And that to me is freedom, that movement. It doesn't mean that the character gets everything right. It doesn't mean that the character never gets angry or has worry or has stress or has indifference or dislike or jealousy. It's going to change the person over time, and there's going to be an evolution of that person with that seeing, so there'll be a relaxation. But actually the character's still got its habitual way of being and his habitual responses. So if somebody pokes its arm, if it's got a very fiery temper, it might be like, no! Or if somebody steals, there might be a bit of violence or anger that comes out. But then there's this other part that's deeply relaxed in who you are. Who you are. I think I'm not looking in the camera. There is the camera. Who am I talking to? Who you are. Yatta. Okay, so I open it up to questions after that very long introduction.